Hello, and welcome to the Essay Workshop. Let's start with the basics. What are you trying to do in a history essay? Remember, a history essay isn't just you taking what you've read in the book and vomiting it onto a piece of paper. Your history essays should not read like a history textbook. That's because history textbooks are usually trying to tell the reader what happened and how it happened. We call that narration. When you write a history essay, your goal is different. You're trying to argue, not narrate. Why argue? Because an essay will usually need you to give an opinion about something and argue that your opinion makes sense. And yes, for that, you'll need facts that you get from the textbook or your own reading, but you'll need to do more than that. Because if you just say the facts but don't do anything else with them, you won't be able to show that your opinion makes sense. In fact, you won't be showing an opinion at all. So remember that. In most essays, you'll need to show your opinion, and a sensible opinion is always backed up by facts. What kind of opinions will you have to think about? Well, it depends on the question. You might be asked how important something was, or how different two things were, or you might be given an idea and then asked if you agree with it. Notice how none of those questions asked you to just narrate or just to write down what happened. In all of those questions, you need to argue something and support your opinion with facts that you've learned. How do you do that? Let's think back to those examples we used just now. Let's say the essay question is, how important was the discovery of farming in helping people move from the Stone Age to civilization? Remember, you want to approach it by arguing, not describing. Now, there are two choices here. Either you'll show how important the discovery of farming was by listing all the ways in which it was good, and if you can say more stuff, then that shows how important it was. Or you'll show how important the discovery of farming was by comparing it with other things that helped people move from the Stone Age, such as the discovery of fire, metal, and writing. And you might find that farming was more important than metal and writing, but not as important as fire. Which of the two involves only narrating? Which of the two involves some facts, but also comparing and arguing? This approach is better, of course. Or how about a question like, how different was ancient Egyptian society from ancient Greek society? Again, remember we want you to argue, not narrate. Remember the difference between just narrating and arguing. Which of the following do you think is which? Ancient Egyptian society was ruled by a pharaoh, and there were priests and lots of slaves, and most people were farmers, and sometimes they would build the pyramids. And in ancient Greece, there was no king, and there were lots of priests and lots of slaves, and most people were farmers, and they didn't build pyramids. The end. Or, ancient Egyptian and Greek society was mostly similar, because even though ancient Egypt was ruled by a pharaoh, but in Greece there was no king, life for most people was very similar, because in both Egypt and Greece, most people were farmers. There were lots of slaves doing hard work, and religion was very important to all people. And since life was similar for most people in Egypt and Greece, Egyptian and Greek society was mostly similar. Remember, the arguing approach is way better than the narrating approach. Or maybe the question gives you an idea or a statement to comment on, something like, World War II was mostly caused by Germany being aggressive. Do you agree? Again, let's think of the difference between narrating and arguing. I don't agree because World War II was caused by many things, not mostly Germany being aggressive. Germany was being aggressive, but there was also the Great Depression and appeasement and the League of Nations failing. Therefore, it wasn't mainly Germany being aggressive. Or, I don't agree because even though Germany being aggressive did a lot to cause World War II, Germany being aggressive was caused by other factors. It's true that Germany being aggressive sparked World War II, but the Great Depression allowed the Nazis to come to power and they made Germany aggressive. The Treaty of Versailles also made Germany want revenge and gave her an excuse to be aggressive. The League of Nations was weak when Germany grew aggressive, but its weakness also encouraged Germany to be aggressive. That's why World War II was not mostly caused by Germany being aggressive. I hope you can see that one of these approaches is a lot more impressive because it actually shows your opinion and your argument. Not to mention, this approach doesn't actually address the question. Just because other factors exist, it doesn't mean that it wasn't mostly this. Notice how in all three of these questions we looked at, the better approach showed your opinion, whereas the not-so-good approach didn't show your opinion. The not-so-good approach doesn't need a lot of brain power from you. All you have to do is vomit out facts. But that's not how we do history essays. Okay, now we're going to go into some abstract stuff about how to actually prove a point. If you feel this is going to be a bit much for you, feel free to skip ahead to the timestamp on the screen. Otherwise, here we go. How do you prove something is important? We've already seen a bit how to approach this, by comparing it with something else. In some ways, this is just the nature of history. Things are never just black and white. Asking how important something is isn't the same as, say, asking how tall someone is. How tall is Chris Chan? He's 1.87 meters tall. But if you ask, how important were the Crusades in leading to the Renaissance, you need to think about how things can be both in some ways important and in other ways not so important, and how you're never just dealing with one thing. That's why you need to compare. So, how important were the Crusades in leading to the Renaissance? You don't prove they were important by writing a long list of facts, narrating how the Crusades led to the Renaissance. You prove they were important by providing facts on how they led to the Renaissance, but also comparing these with other things that led to the Renaissance, such as the Black Death, or the rise of universities, or the fall of the feudal system. If the Crusades played a role in these other factors too, maybe the Crusades were actually pretty important. That's a far better way to show importance than simply listing out all the ways that the Crusades helped lead to the Renaissance and then hoping that that list of facts is longer than the list of facts for the other causes of the Renaissance. And related to this idea of importance is the idea of implicit versus explicit arguments. Implicit arguments are those that aren't clearly expressed, but they rely on the facts to speak for themselves. Explicit arguments use facts like implicit arguments, but unlike implicit arguments, they use the facts to clearly voice an argument. In history essays, explicit arguments are always better than implicit arguments, since they're the ones that clearly show your opinion. Meanwhile, implicit arguments don't clearly show your opinion, and the reader usually has to guess what you're trying to say. Let's try to answer the following question. Why were Enlightenment ideas a threat to absolute monarchs? Here are two approaches. Let's see which one is implicit and which one explicit. Enlightenment ideas were a threat to the absolute monarchs because they said that the rulers and the people were on the same level. This threatened the power of the absolute monarchs because it meant they couldn't do whatever they wanted. Enlightenment ideas were also a threat to absolute monarchs because some of the ideas tried to control what the ruler could do or couldn't do, and others tried to create a strong government system to balance out the power of the ruler. This was a threat to the absolute monarchs because it weakened their power. Or, Enlightenment ideas were a threat to the absolute monarchs because some of these ideas said that people and rulers are on the same level. Other ideas said that there should be a way to control what the rulers could and could not do. And still other ideas tried to build up a strong government to balance the power of the ruler. That's why Enlightenment ideas were a threat to the absolute monarchs. I hope you can see that this approach was explicit, because it clearly gives an opinion on why these ideas were a threat, both by describing the ideas and by clearly addressing the question. In this case, by explaining why and how these threatened the absolute monarchs. This approach is implicit. You can kind of detect what the writer's opinion is, but you basically have to guess. It's not clear what the writer is actually trying to argue. Why exactly were these ideas such a threat? The writer is basically leaving it to the reader to form their own opinion, rather than clearly stating the writer's opinion in the essay. It's a far weaker essay than the explicit approach. Hopefully, you'll also see that the implicit arguments rely a lot on narrating facts, but without doing much with them. And we're back. Now that we've tested out a few approaches, let's take a look at structure. Let's think about what a good structure looks like and what a not so good structure looks like. This is a paragraph, the building block of your essay. The first paragraph in your essay will be your introduction. The last one is the conclusion, and everything in between are your body paragraphs. In the introduction, you briefly say what your opinion is and give an overview of what arguments and points you'll talk about. And in your conclusion, you'll quickly summarize what you've said and what your opinion is. But apart from that, all of your paragraphs should look something like this. This first bit is your topic sentence, followed by the meat of your paragraph, made up of facts and arguments. You could end the paragraph with a summarizing sentence, but it's not really necessary, and usually it just wastes time. Try to get your topic sentences right. A good topic sentence will tell the reader what to expect in the paragraph, and it'll help you answer the question. Look at these two sample topic sentences below, and you'll see what I mean. Let's say the question is something like, did the Renaissance mostly cause good rather than harm? Let's say we agree with this idea, and now come the body paragraphs. Compare these two different sets of topic sentences. The Renaissance caused good by encouraging people to express themselves more freely. Blah, 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 blah. End of paragraph. The Renaissance caused good by pushing people to make discoveries in medicine. Blah, 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 blah. End of paragraph. The Renaissance caused some harm because it made the church weaker, which caused unrest in Europe. Blah, 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 blah. End of paragraph. Now, contrast with these topic sentences. In the 14th century, the Renaissance began. Blah, 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 blah. End of paragraph. The Renaissance made artwork more realistic and humanistic. Blah, 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 blah. End of paragraph. The Renaissance made the church weaker because people supported it less. Blah, 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 blah. End of paragraph. See the difference there? These topic sentences do the job because they tell the reader what argument this paragraph is now going to address, and they make the writer's opinion very clear by addressing the question. And I hope you see that these ones are a lot weaker. They do tell the writer what the paragraph will be about, but the opinion is not very clear at all, and the reader might even start wondering how this paragraph will be relevant. Anyway, I hope this clears things up a bit. Topic sentences are your friend. Use them. And finally, now let's look at essay structure. Let's look at two different ways to do it and compare them. And let's say the question is, the French Revolution did more harm than good. Do you agree? Here's one way to structure our answer. First comes your introduction, where you lay out your opinion, let's say you agree, and your key points. Yes, I agree, because it did more harm than good in terms of government changes, societal changes, and France's foreign relations. The French Revolution caused more harm than good in terms of government changes because it brought instability. Next comes a comparison of the good and the harm. The French Revolution might have replaced King Louis XVI and the unfair estate system with a republican system, but this is outweighed by the fact that it also brought the violent radical Jacobins into power who killed many people, and in the end replaced them with Napoleon, who was a monarch, who was then also replaced by King Louis XVIII, which meant that the French government ended up being the same as before the revolution. The French Revolution caused more harm than good in terms of societal changes because it caused violence. Next comes a comparison of the good and the harm. The French Revolution gave much more equality to the people of the Third Estate and got rid of the old privileges of the First and Second Estates, and even gave France the Declaration of the Rights of Man and a constitution to protect citizens' rights. But this is outweighed by the fact that it allowed Robespierre to take power and through the Reign of Terror caused many senseless deaths in France and turned people against one another. The French Revolution caused more harm than good in terms of France's foreign relations. Next comes a comparison of the good and the harm. The French Revolution might have made France friendlier to countries which prized democracy and liberty, such as the USA, but it did more harm because it turned many of France's neighbors against her, and people such as Robespierre and Napoleon took advantage of this chaos and were unable to bring lasting peace to France either. The wars only ended with the defeat of Napoleon in 1815. And then comes the conclusion. Now comes our second approach. Yes, I agree, because it did more harm than good in terms of the Revolutionary Wars, the Reign of Terror, the rise of Napoleon, but also the end of the estate system and the Declaration of the Rights of Man. The French Revolution caused the Revolutionary Wars. Next comes a description of all the harm caused by the Revolutionary Wars. The French Revolution caused the Reign of Terror. Next comes a description of all the harm caused by the Reign of Terror. The French Revolution caused the rise of Napoleon. Next comes a description of all the harm caused by the rise of Napoleon. But the French Revolution also ended the estate system. Next comes a description of all the good caused by ending the estate system. The French Revolution allowed the Declaration of the Rights of Man to be written. Next comes a description of all the good caused by the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Now let's compare why the French Revolution did more harm than good, because the Revolutionary Wars, Napoleon's Wars, and the Reign of Terror caused many deaths, which means that even if many people got some equality after the ending of the estate system and through the Declaration of the Rights of Man, they did not live long to enjoy it. And then comes the conclusion. See the difference? This structure is what I call tight structure. Each paragraph is a self-contained building block that gives information and uses it to explain the writer's opinion by comparing and analyzing, which means that each paragraph can help address the question. You'll have to cram each paragraph with information and comparisons, but you end up with a good, solid essay that addresses the question and makes your opinion very clear in every single paragraph. Now, compare with the other structure, which I call loose structure. It might seem impressive since you're describing a lot of stuff and providing a lot of facts, but notice how much narration is going on. Most of the essay is basically just narration, with only a bit of comparison and explanation and analysis right at the very end. Most of the paragraphs aren't doing much to address the question, since they're mostly just a list of facts. The reader is left wondering about your opinion until nearly the end of the essay, which makes for a weak essay. The one advantage of the loose structure is that it's pretty easy to write, since you're mostly just narrating. But if you can, try to go for the tight structure. And there you have it. I hope this has helped you understand a bit better how to approach history essays and what to look out for. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.